Hey gamers, welcome to a Game Club video. I recently finished Final Fantasy VII Remake. I started the Yuffie DLC, but I wanted to make this video as someone who never played the original Final Fantasy VII. What do I think of this remake? When I bought this game when it was released, I went in thinking, okay, this is the remake of 7. I'll finally understand what people really loved about this game because I never played it. Again, when 7 came out initially, I was a Nintendo guy, never really cared for PlayStation, let alone JRPGs. I never really cared for turn-based combat, whatever. Now it's all different. Same story I'd say every time I talk about a fucking JRPG. Okay. So I was like, okay, I should take this game out, see what this remake's about, see, whatever. As I started playing this game, it took me a long time because I kind of dropped it on and off at that point, and then I got to the Hell House fight, and then that boss fight just pissed me off, and I rage quit the game. I was like, fuck this game, I'm gonna do something else. I'm not making any headway with this, whatever. So after some time has passed, everyone I follow all said that they did not like the ending of this game. That this completely changes Final Fantasy VII, is this a remake, whatever, and it kind of spurred this discussion of what entails a remake. Is it just keeping the story intact and just remaking the gameplay of it? Is it what can you do and what can't you do with a remake, etc., etc. So I started seeing all this hubbub about it, and I don't want to necessarily say, well, Final Fantasy VII fans, you just need to get with the times, man. They just change it because it's a remake and all this kind of stuff. And I've seen that also thrown around towards criticisms of this game as well. DSP did not like Remake at all until now because now he knows it's a different game, whatever. But it's they called it a remake, man. And it's I get that statement, but at the same time, after beating it, I kind of don't think that people who are upset with this game are in the wrong either. Because again, it really takes the term remake to a whole new level where now it's just what is this? And I know some people might bring up, because I'm a huge Ava fan, well, what about the rebuilds? I don't really recall, because again, I wasn't around the PR buzz of Rebuild 1, 2, let alone 3 or whatever, but I don't feel like those movies were marketed as remakes or we're gonna tell the same story. And especially when you watch Rebuild 1, that watched the original show since now, whatever, they've been very direct, this is gonna be different, there's definitely, major changes even in the first movie. So I kind of feel like Ava Rebuild kind of already sets up this is not going to be a retelling or anything. This is just its own thing. Final Fantasy VII Remake, I feel like when you go through the PR of it just, I don't know what, because they obviously did not want to spoil this is gonna be what it's about, and they wanted to say it's expanding and it's gonna be delving more into the characters or whatever, which is typical PR. And then when you get the actual game, it's this is completely different. And I wouldn't say it's false advertising, but I kind of feel like it's really, really taking a risk that I don't know who it benefits. Because again, when you do these kind of changes, you really have to ask, what are these changes for? Who is the customer for 7 Remake? Because these changes have alienated fans of 7 because it's this is not the game I like and or whatever, and newcomers I don't think are gonna really appreciate the changes either. When you do these kind of you watch Rebuild. I'm just gonna keep comparing this to Ava Rebuild. You can appreciate the changes that they've done with Ava Rebuild. Okay, this is different. As a new viewer, because again, I started with Ava Rebuild, to be honest, because, NGE is such a hard, the show is so hard to find, so the Rebuilds were the most accessible thing at the time. That at least told a story that's okay, I'm on board, I can follow through. And Ava Rebuilds never really call out the fact, this is different, or whatever. It's just more like it tells it straight. Oh, as I as far as you can say about Ava, but it tells it straightforward, like what you're getting into. Final Fantasy VII Remake, it keeps making these like a lot of the dialogue is like, this is different. This is going on a different path, and it's like, what does that mean for me? Like, again, the only thing I know of Final Fantasy VII is Aerith dies and Sephiroth is the bad guy, and a comet comes or whatever. But these are like just things, like. And I feel like if the idea was that when they remade Seven, it's like, well, we can't have the same impact of Aerith's death scene now because everyone knows about it. I think that's just a cop-out reason to change the story because, again, you could have the same plot twist and it still have a meaning to it. But I don't even think that's why they changed it. I think that's just a thing that they said in PR, I would think, because I think they want to tell the story of, like, what if we just change fate? Why do we have to stick to the same story? And I do kind of like those stories, but again, there's nothing for me to appreciate when I'm playing this, and I don't want to like. Oh, I feel like it kind of rides the line of like, oh yeah, they did this so that you could feel incentive to play the original, and it's like, no, currently I'm playing Persona 3 Reload, and that game is great on its own, and I would kind of say it's close to being the definitive version, but it does make me want to go back and play FES still. Like, it's not like it doesn't replace it or anything, and I kind of feel remakes are trapped in this in a meaningless debate of will this replace the original, and I was like, no. No, like I think the original should still be accessible. I think it's reductive to say that we should remake it and have the remake be the definitive experience. I don't think that's what the intent of a remake should be. It should just be, this is what I interpret this thing to be or whatever, or just remake it in whatever. And I think that's fine, but I don't want, like, 7 Remake plays so much of like, you should play the original so you can really appreciate this. And it's like, I don't want it to be like required material to play the original. I should want to play the original because I want to. And the remake should be something that should be added to it. Like, I could play Resident Evil 1 remake, and then I could say, you know what, I want to play the original, see what that's like. You play Resident Evil 4 remake, and it's like, it's a solid remake. I don't really love a lot of the changes, but it's a solid remake, but I wouldn't say that it removes the original either. So I think 7 Remake kind of plays on that meaningless debate of like, does a remake replace the original? Oh, you should play the original or whatever. And it's like, I don't think that it needs that either. So what was this game really trying to do? Because again, if you remake a game and you do this egregious story changing, you risk alienating the fan of Final Fantasy VII, but at the cost of like, also, what does this mean for the newcomer? Like, I don't know what this serves at, to any degree. I was talking to a friend about Gurren Lagann because they recently put the movies in theater, and a lot of people may make the mistake of thinking that the movies are equivalent to the show. They're not, but the movies are fun to watch all the same. I think that the changes that they did in the movies are okay in the sense that, hey, the movies just kind of give you the gist and the general spirit of what the show's about, but check the show out. Like, it doesn't erase it, but it's still kind of like a fun thing to watch. But you play this, and it's like, this doesn't add anything to me because you watch like the Gurren Lagann movies. They kind of give you a little bit more of a background as to what was going on in that universe, like what happened in the beginning, like what why did Lord Genome force humanity to go underground, all this kind of stuff. They showed that conflict of it, like the original Spiral war against the anti-spirals, whatever. They show a little more context of that, but it doesn't like change the course of the story. It kind of ends in the same place where the show ends. But this, it completely changes the path of where Final Fantasy VII was going in the original and then the remake. So it kind of feels like it's a lost game in terms of what it means for the player. Because am I supposed to take the remake as like, oh, this is why people love Final Fantasy VII? Like, what if I end up not liking the remake? Then that may alienate me from playing the original. Like, it it takes so many pointless risks that it doesn't need, and I don't think it's anything wrong with changing the story or anything like that. But if you're gonna change the story, it does need to kind of have something. It has to be meaningful, and it has to be kind of like there's a point to it, because other than like subverting expectations, it's like what does this mean? Again, I'm playing remake and it's like what does this mean for me? Like I'm watching this video and they're saying, oh, Wedge dies. Okay, so what does that like? But Wedge is alive when I'm playing the remake. Like, should I be like, whoa, or whatever? Like some of these changes, I can't like recognize. The only change I'm only getting is Aerith, and that's it. That's the only thing, and that to me, it's like that's not enough. And why just change the whole story for that? Like it's I don't know how I feel about it as a person who never played 7, and I still want to play 7, by the way, so it's not like, oh, I'm never going to touch it, but I don't know how Remake stands as a game, because it kind of just doesn't give anything to anyone. It just takes these risks at the expense of, like, of its own purpose, like, again, I wouldn't say, like, the rebuilds, going back to Ava, debatably could be seen as a sequel to the Ava show, but it could also be on its own. But is 7 Remake a sequel? Is it a retelling? Like, it's a remake, but should we be connecting that to the original? Like, and then if we're gonna delve into, like, if we're gonna start bringing up, like, multiverse and possibility kind of stuff, like, why? Again, what does this have anything in like in line for the story? Like, are we gonna go into the same place at the end? And this kind of puts a little bit more of a expectation for the next two games, because if we're taking these massive changes to the story, you're risking, if the next two games, Rebirth and Reunion, if those two games kind of suck, like, was it worth it? Like, you're gonna have people that are gonna stick through it because it's like, hey, this has an end date and you can see where it is at the end. And if it's not gonna come together by the end, it's like, then did we really need to take these risks? There's nothing wrong with changing the story or adding stuff to the story. I don't think there's anything wrong with that in nature. But in the case of Final Fantasy VII Remake, it takes so many risks that it's like, I don't know the point, because it alienates the original fans, and then the newcomer will not understand this, and then if they go back and play the original, are they gonna like these changes, or are they gonna side with the fans that are not happy with this? Like, it takes these kind of gambles, and it's I don't know. And people can compare this to, like, Kingdom Hearts kind of storytelling, which is kind of like a convoluted mess as well. But my issue I have with 7 Remake's dialogue, at least, is I kind of don't I'm I'm into, like, subverting and all this kind of stuff, sure, but some of the dialogue, it's just like, what? Like, you listen to it and it's just like, wait, so we're up, like, there's a line where Aerith tells Sephiroth, "You're wrong. Everything about you is wrong," and it's like, what? Like, what does that mean? And then, like, they talk about the whispers, and it's like, what? Like, okay, like, they're the arbiters of fate, okay, but, like, what? It's just bizarre dialogue, which I think is, like, kind of on point for Tetsuya Nomura's kind of storytelling, but it just doesn't serve a point, and it kind of makes it seem more convoluted than it needs to be. Like, people can say that about Ava all they want, but I kind of feel Ava has a lot of service to what they're going for. This just seems like it's like, okay, we're just talking about, like, the cliff notes of it is like, oh, they're upending fate or whatever, but it's like, okay, but some of the dialogue is just kind of like, oh, it's just stiff and awkward, and it's like these are very grandiose concepts, and it's being delivered in, like, awkward ways. So story wise, I think Seven Remake is a hodgepodge where it's just like you'll either just hate it or you'll just be like, I don't know what to make of it. Because again, I like stories that deal with like what if you go against fate, but this I don't quite get the point. Like why do this when I'm not gonna have a true appreciation of what is being changed? You know, like I don't understand the scale of like what is being changed. The only thing that's like a massive change would be Aerith's death scene. But they do these other changes, and like everyone I talk to is like, "Oh yeah, this is totally different." And it's like I can't appreciate the scale of these changes or what it means. And you could argue maybe by the next two games it's gonna like come together and show you the scope of it. And I'm curious to see where it's gonna end up. I guess it's just I don't know story wise, gameplay wise. Let's get into the gameplay because this was the thing I was a little bit more vocal about. As I was playing through it, I dropped it a lot, so I did not retain any of the gameplay tutorials. You know, honestly, uh, again, I forgot that the operator has a parry mechanic completely. So I just knew it was heavy and it was heavy attacks and slow movement. That's all I knew. So it's like okay, so I just kind of stuck with Punisher. Then when I staggered them, then I switched to operator, but I never really used the parry mechanic. Hell House just bodied me. Hated the Hell House fight because this is what my issue I had with the gameplay system. When you have such a rewarding, satisfying feel to like the hack and slash nature of Final Fantasy VII Remake's combat, I'll never want to play with menus. I'll never want to do that because take Devil May Cry 3, Devil May Cry 5, whatever, and you love the combat. But what if someone said, "Hold up, let's actually have you go through menus to do like magic"? But you love using your sword. Why would you want to go through menus in Devil May Cry? And that's kind of what I was like feeling with in Final Fantasy VII Remake, where it's like I just like mashing. I don't want to stop the gameplay to go through menus, and to also fill up a meter. It's just kind of like counterintuitive. So when I was going against the Hell House fight, the melee attacks were doing like minuscule damage. You needed to use magic pretty much to do any meaningful damage. But it's like I don't have ATB to use it. Aerith doesn't have ATB to use it. I need to do stuff. But then I realized, okay, so if I block, if I dodge, I can also gain meter. Okay, that's not really helpful. And you know, because you're still taking damage, be it whiffle damage. But by the time I get a meter, it's like, do I want to heal? Do I want to heal Aerith? Do I like what do I need to do? Oh, I need to also refill my magic. So it never really felt together, and I kind of wish you could use items in general. That way, like you could use ATB items. Okay, you know, just expend an item and you'll gain 1 bar of ATB. But the more I played it, I guess I kind of get what they were going for. Like the ATB system is kind of like to integrate a turn-based mechanic in a real-time action game, I guess. And you know, the after the Hell House fight, I started to like kind of delve into a little bit more. I kind of go back and forth on it. So I end the gameplay with just thinking, I don't know how I feel about the combat. Like I don't love it, but I certainly don't hate it as much as I did when I first played it. Uh, but I kind of just feel it's a little bit weird. And I've seen some people even have a harder time with the Hell House fight as well. So at least I'm not alone in thinking that fight is atrocious. Because again, every fight after that was hard, but it wasn't as nearly as frustrating as Hell House. Like I hated the Hell House fight. That to me was just I don't need to play this game anymore at that point. And then I got past it and was like, okay, now we're going places. Um so I don't know how I feel about the combat. I get a little bit of the Yuffie DLC. I will say I think that is probably my favorite thing. Like if Final Fantasy VII Remake was we get rid of Cloud, get rid of that, kick it out and just focus on Yuffie, great game because I liked her combat way more, and the music is way better in the Yuffie DLC. The music in general for Final Fantasy VII Remake is good. I don't want to say anything bad about that, but I like the intermission music way more. It's just more like bombastically weird and goofy, and I just kind of love that a little bit more. Uh, I can't remember the name of the song, but it's like the first combat theme you hear that's like with like a heavy metal like rock theme. It's like something turtle in the lyrics, and it's so good. I was like, man, I wish this was like the main battle theme because it's so good. Uh, but anyways, the music is solid. The combat, I liked it in the Yuffie DLC a little bit more, but the combat is it grew me a little bit by the end, especially once I remember that there's a parry mechanic I could have exploited or used, but whatever. Uh, I just I just think the issue I have with it is if you're gonna make a game, I don't like this hybrid of like let's combine turn-based and real-time into one game. I don't think that's necessarily satisfying. I think the one game that does it better is Xenoblade. Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 3. I never played 2, so I played a little bit of 2, so whatever. But 1 and 3, I think, does a very good job of just having, like, hey, you're actually moving in real time. You can actually go through menus in real time, and it's just very fast and very, like, straightforward to me. I kind of liked it a little bit more in Xenoblade Chronicles. Meanwhile, in this, it just felt like I want to do this, and then I'm being kind of punished if I don't use this other mechanic as well. Like it was just kind of weird, and I just don't know how I feel about it, you know. So it was just kind of miffed or mixed, I should say, on it. Uh, I guess you know honestly, if I play Rebirth a little bit more intensely, maybe I'll have a like have a better chance. Because the other issue I was finding in Seven Remake was I couldn't find good gear, in my opinion. Like, I would go through almost every store I'd ran into. Like, all of the weapons were never nearly as good. And it's like, okay, well, maybe if I upgrade it, it's like, okay, maybe it will get pretty good after all these upgrades. And it's like, it just feels stifling, and I just didn't really feel like I needed to change, like, especially Barrett or Tifa's. Tifa's weapons, I got hers to get to like 110 by the end. The other like gloves I got for her were like, all right, 40. It's like, okay, so is that really gonna get to 100 even if I upgraded fully? Like, I don't know. And then the SP stuff, I don't know if I was doing something wrong because it's like it really felt very minuscule how much SP I was getting. Like I just kind of stopped checking sometimes. Then like after like 3 chapters, is like okay, now I can really do some meaningful upgrades. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. Uh, it does do this thing at the end of the game, which I don't genuinely love, where they put you through a gauntlet and then you get to the final boss and you go through multiple phases, and then if you die you go either, at least with this, you either go back to the beginning of that of the at least the first phase of the final fight, or you go all the way back to the last checkpoint. But it's like I kind of wish there was a thing in between where I could just kind of stop and pick this up later, because I never trust games that have autosave. Like I just don't like. If I left, like you know, I'm at the Sephiroth boss fight. It's like okay, well, I want to like have some lunch, so I should probably like quit, right? But if I quit the game, I don't want to risk going all the way back to going through like these slow moving moments or whatever, because this game also does the cardinal sin where they have in combat cutscenes that you can't skip. And Xenoblade Chronicles 3 did this too, and I fucking hate it. Like, I get it. Like, you know, to bring up Xenoblade Chronicles 3, for example, the first time I saw these in combat cutscenes, they were cool, and it's like, oh, this is like emotional, and I was like feeling like emotional about it. But after dying in the final phase of the fucking fight, having to go all the way back there, it was just like, oh my god, do we really have to stop the fighting, pull the camera back, show all of the cutscenes you've seen already, and it's like I don't want to do this. And they did this here, and it's like because I died even in the part where you're making your way to Sephiroth, and it's like I I don't I don't want to see these stupid fucking cutscenes or having to walk through slow motion movements. It's like just get me to the fights that I need to get to. Like that that to me is like the worst thing you can do in anything. Like it's not even like get good kind of thing. Like I don't I it's not like the punishment of death is the death itself. Like, okay, I have to restart the whole boss fight. Fine. Like the Sephiroth, like as I said, the only like saving grace for the Sephiroth thing was at least I could start at the beginning of the Sephiroth fight, and I don't have to go all the way back to the beginning of the final area. But having to like, okay, let's fight Sephiroth. Okay, now you have to watch the cutscenes of Tifa showing up again. Okay, watch the cutscene of Barrett showing up again, and it's like these were cool like the first time. I should not have to be seeing these like 50 times. And sure, it took me like, I'll be honest, it took me like 3-4 attempts to beat Sephiroth once I learned about the parry mechanic, but I still don't like that because this was, and it's not even exclusive to the final fight, to be honest. Every fight has these stupid fucking cutscene combat scenes, and it's like, I don't like this. And it's the same shit, like, watching this video, kind of like criticizing the remake, I did kind of think about, yeah, there's a lot of forced walking segments in this game, and it's trash. I don't like where the game just forces you to grind to a halt. I don't like Ghost of Tsushima that much. It was a very like average game, but the one thing it did, and I don't know why not any game copied this. Like as far as I know, Sucker Punch did not copyright this fucking mechanic of if you run, the person you're following, like you're walking with, will run with you. Like, guys, just have us run. It is so lame to go through a game and then you're like, all right, wait, we have to walk for no fucking reason. Like, and it's just not even like the normal walking speed. It's a slower walking speed. So, I just thought back of all that stuff. Like, yeah, this stuff can be just fixed. Fuck this shit. Enough of these fucking games doing this. Like, it is maddening. Like, Gears of War, I want to say started this because Gears of War did this a lot, and then God of War did this too, and it's just like, enough with this. And I feel that we need a fucking rebellion against these fucking in-combat cutscenes, because again, they're cool once, but when you're like getting annoyed at a boss fight or just dying over and over and having to see these fucking in-combat cutscenes just lose meaning, and you can't skip it, it's just like you're just gonna want to stop playing. Because I just want to stop playing, not because the boss fight is hard. It was just that I'm gonna have to like fight, and then I'm gonna have to put the controller down and wait until this fucking little mini movie is over. It's just, we don't need this. We don't need this bullshit. And I think back, I beat Strangers of Paradise recently, and I have to say, I'm going through that game again with a friend because it has co-op in it. I have to say, Strangers of Paradise is the best Final Fantasy game I played. I played 16. I didn't really care that much for the setting. The story was whatever. The ending was good, but I just thought everything else was kind of whatever. The gameplay is just kind of cathartic in a very dumb way, but I wish it was a little bit better. Strangers of Paradise does a good job with difficulty and satisfying like kind of combat. Great game. I love the game. The story is dumb fun. I love how like, and it gets kind of meaningful by the end, and it's just a great game. I love Strangers of Paradise. I will die on that hill. It's a great game. And that game does not waste your fucking time within combat cutscenes. The most you'll get is literally just when you fucking beat the first phase of a boss fight, and it's just you being the shit out of the boss. I can sit through that because at least, and those cutscenes are very quick, very fucking quick. Like, the most you'll see is, okay, Jack will just punch the boss or just like spin him around and throw him, and that's it. And then the second phase starts immediately. Then you beat it, then it's just the end. And it's like, this is what you do. This is how you handle it. Just have it be a very quick thing. The longest one was the Barrett cutscene. The Tifa thing I can kind of stun because all she did was just come in, just spin kick, and that's it. Barrett, it's like, okay, Sephiroth has to like push you through the floor. Okay, now you're restricted to the ground, and you see Cloud struggling to get up. And then Barrett shows up. And then Barrett says something like, it's just a little bit too long than it needs to be. And it's like, I don't want to see this 50 times just to get to where I died. You know, like it's that shit that just kind of like this padding a fight for no reason. And so many parts of the game does this where it's just you see these long in combat cutscenes that you don't really care about. They're not even fun. Again, Strangers of Paradise, the cutscenes they show you are just fun cutscenes. It's just, hey, this guy does not want to listen to a fucking boss monologue, so he just punches him in the face. There's a boss fight where the guy's like, I am the darkness of this, and I was at the beginning, and Jack just comes in, I don't give a fuck, and punches him, and then the fight starts. Like it's just so quick and to the point. There's nothing wrong with having an enemy like kind of ramble or whatever, but have that be at the beginning of the fight and at the end. The stuff in the middle, like have it be skippable after you've seen it. Like the game should know, okay, he got a game over. He could skip this fight. Let's just let him skip it. Instead of like, no, he has to watch this. Sit through and watch it, and it's not even gratifying. It's just okay. Tifa shows up. Okay, Barrett shows up. Like the first time is it's like, wow. The 50 times it's like, okay, can I like fucking get to where I want to be at? Come on. So that was like my major gripe with the combat there. And watching that video also made me remember there were a lot of chapters in this game that were kind of filler and padding. The Hojo stuff, that part of the game just felt so fucking generic. It was too generic to be interesting. It was like, oh, all right, go into this room. Okay, fight this. Okay, go to the next room. Okay. And it's like this is what we're doing. Like and these fights, some of them are fun, some of them, to be honest, but some of them are just not fun. Like the whack-a-mole enemies, that's the best way I could describe them. Is probably my least favorite enemy type. I hated it. It was just these guys can just shoot you and then just immediately teleport somewhere else, and you can waste an ATB move just because you aimed where he wasn't anymore. Like, come on. And there were like a lot of moments where you would do something. Now, I'll be a little bit fair and say I don't know if they necessarily took the resource away once you used it, but there would be a moment where I would either use a potion, use a healing spell, whatever, and they would interrupt you, and you either die or it would just cancel out what was going on. And it's like, and I never really looked to see if it took the cost, you know. So it's like, did it take the cost and not give me the reward for that? Like, did I heal and not heal, but it took the cost of magic anyway? Like, I don't know, but there's like a lot of stuff like that, which I was just kind of like, come on. So overall, would I recommend 7 Remake? I can't say, because honestly, the game is too weird, and not in a weird like, ooh, this is a weird cool thing. It's just like I don't know who this serves, because again, I'm a newcomer to Final Fantasy VII. I never played the original, and I'm playing the remake. And even like as a person who never played 7, like I can't be upset in the sense of, like, they changed it. It's more of just like, what do these changes mean? And like, should I care? Like I don't know. Like, because they make the changes a plot point. And it's like I don't know if the scale of this. The only scale I can kind of comprehend is Aerith's death and Sephiroth to a degree. But it's like, but these other changes, should I like care? Should I give a shit that Wedge is alive? I don't know. But again, it just relies so heavily on like the assumption that you'll be there for the next 2 games. And it's like, I don't know, if you don't like this game, you're not going to get in, and the story's going to be whatever. And as for a returning fan of 7, I don't think you're going to care for this, because some of these changes can be seen as cheap. Because again, when you take a death scene, it's like, well, we're not going to do that death scene again. It's like, this is way too obvious of a subversion to really do anymore. Like, even by the time that 7 Remake was new, I feel that the subversion of expectation kind of stuff was played out. As I said before, there's nothing wrong with subverting expectations, but it kind of has to be something interesting you're doing with it. And changing Aerith's death scene is either going to be... They didn't do enough with it in the remake to kind of say it's bad or good yet, but it does put the expectation of this change could be either really good and mean and different in a good way, or it's gonna be really bad and it's gonna be lame because you're taking something that was applauded at the time and changing it, and it's like, will the change be meaningful? Like, you know, I can't think of a game I played where it's something equivalent, because again, the changes in Ava Rebuild, I would argue, are actually pretty good changes in the sense that it kind of sets the movies in a very unique path that gives you more insight into stuff that you want to know about, or whatever, and it's more of like a companion to the original. 7 Remake, I it doesn't really do that in my opinion. Like, it doesn't make it seem like, yeah, you're gonna want to play the original and it's gonna be really cool. Like, you watch the rebuilds, for example, and it's gonna be very cool to watch the original show too. Like, because there's stuff that complement each other in both. I'd argue 7 Remake, I can't say it does that because it's not making me think, oh, this is cool. Oh, they're gonna change Aerith's death scene. That's cool. Like, I can't say that. Like, when I watched Rebuild 3, and again, I didn't see the show at this point. When I watched Rebuild 3 for the first time, I liked how different it was. Oh, this is like very different. Oh, like, it's drastically changes things, and it's like a very cool thing to like bite into. And I've talked to other people who didn't like Rebuild 3, and they were saying that they didn't like it because it took so long for that movie to come out, and they kind of assumed that this was gonna be like a slight abridged kind of movie with some changes. And saying Rebuild 3 changed so much that it only took to the fourth film to come out where they started to appreciate 3 a little bit more and recontextualize the Rebuild films. But again, as someone who never watched Ava, these Rebuild movies were great on their own. I can't say that about 7 Remake at all, because these changes go hand in hand with the original too much. Like, it's just, you can't address and point saying this is different and have me care. Rebuilds did not go out of its way to be like, yeah, you know what? We changed this. Get that. Like, and by the time Rebuild 4, the fourth Rebuild film came out, they did reference the show, but the show did go on Netflix like a year or two before the new Rebuild movie came out, which I think even in my own Ava video, I even mentioned, I do think that they intentionally went out of their way to make sure that the show could be seen again to get ready for the last Rebuild film. So I don't think it's a coincidence that Netflix just happened to get the Ava show on their service. I think it was a very like, they were working to get that made to some degree so people can actually watch it and then can enjoy this. So I do think there was some kind of drive to get to that point. But even with like like 7 Remake, you could argue, well, they made the original easy to buy. You could get on all platforms, etc., etc. But I do think there's a different relation. When you watch something, you could just kind of put it on and just watch it whenever. When you're playing a game, you're dedicating hours and like time to beat it. So I don't know. And there's also like a whole thing about like the hardware it's on. You're either gonna like tolerate the chibi PS1 aesthetics to it and the gameplay mechanics of it, or you may not. Whatever. And I don't think there's anything. A lot of people might also argue, saying, you know what, deal with it. And I get that, but at the same time, like, I don't think it's unreasonable for people to want like a more like nicer looking version of that game either. Like, I think both these things can coexist, in all fairness. But I do think that having 7 just easily, Final Fantasy 7 easily accessible is fine enough. I just don't. I just think that having Remake ties so closely to the game and making it a plot point to say this is different, it's like it's just not gonna pay off if the original fans are not gonna be happy with it, and if the newcomer's not gonna know what the fuck's going on. Like, who is this for? So we'll see. As it is, so I can't recommend 7 Remake as much as like I was hoping for, because I'll be honest, there was a degree of me to hope that I was going to end up liking it a lot, because again, I end up loving the answer, which everyone hates. I think the answer is a great mode in Persona 3 FES. So I was definitely going and thinking, maybe I'm gonna like this game. Maybe I'm gonna have like a different opinion. And it's like the kindest thing I could say about it is that it's all right, but and I guess it's okay that they changed it, but at what cost, and was it really worth it? You know, like I'm a little bit more. I guess I could say I'm also a little bit optimistic that it maybe it could pay off, but I don't know. Like I these kind of changes are a little too risky to be like, yeah, you know, like it's not like the Ava rebuilds where I was on board with all these changes that Rebuild 3 introduced, because I think it was more interesting to see what was going to happen. Uh, but with this, it's like I have no concept of like what what does this change? Like again, you watch Rebuild 3 and you're not going to sit through like, so this is different. Like they kind of say that in a very weird like subtle way, but again, like the subtlety prevails. 7 Remake beats you over the head with it, and then it's like, but if I don't get it, it's like this means nothing to me. Rebuild at least does it in the Ava rebuilds at least does it in a way where it's like true fans will be like, oh, that's different, and newcomers will just be like, okay, this is like dope or whatever. Like they can get in on it, but this I just don't know. I don't know how I feel even as a newcomer. Like it just doesn't serve a point to me, because I could see like, yeah, Persona 3 Reload, I could see that being the game that people will experience Persona 3, and I don't think it's a bad way to experience the game, to be honest, but it does lose a lot of stuff that I loved in FES. But it's like, you know, it doesn't do anything egregious, and it does some stuff that's actually even better. Like I say this, I said this on Twitter a few days ago. A lot of the new stuff they added to Tartarus makes Reload so unbelievably close to being definitive over FES. It is like crazy that Atlas did this. Made a remake that was so close to like surpassing peak of Persona 3 FES. But the music kind of is whatever. Some of the stuff, you know, it's solid. The way the game looks, I think, is a little too bright. You have to go into settings and lower the brightness to make it look at least a little bit better. But you know, it's so close that I just kind of love Reload as it is. But I just can't. I can say that 7 Remake is like great in any other way, or like, oh, because again, I've seen people like kind of I don't want to say belittle or discredit, because I don't think it's necessarily that, but it's saying like, well, no, it's different because it's a remake, and it's like, yeah, but like, how much are we willing to constitute what makes a remake good or what makes a remake? You know, like, yeah, you could remake the story and that's fine, but I kind of feel the important thing in this whole picture is the point of remaking the story. Like, what is really the point of changing Final Fantasy VII's story to that extent? Like, what's the point? Like, if it's not gonna mean anything for newcomers, and it's gonna like potentially like turn off fans, like why do that? If they change the story of 7 to be completely different, let's say it's a completely different story, okay, maybe it's like this was a story that was scrapped at some point or whatever. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like if you're gonna remake a story, at least have it be something that can mean something to someone. You know, like maybe because I don't know. Like, it has to be meaningful to someone. And I don't think that remake accomplishes that, because it's gonna leave newcomers like confused as to like what why. And it's not like, oh, you know, they're engaged confused. Like there's a difference between being like, oh, what does that mean? Oh, I wonder. And like, huh? Like, again, the game goes out of its way in some scenes where it like kind of points out this isn't the way it's supposed to happen. And it's like, okay, like, how is it supposed to pan out? Like, you know, they say like, well, Bear's not supposed to die. And it's like, okay, so who was supposed to die in Shinra? Like, I mean, the president died, but who else is supposed to die? Like, it's just weird shit like that that makes you just kind of question, like, what is the real thing? And it kind of plays the line of like just telling you directly, play the original, and it's like I don't think blatantly telling the person play the original in game is substantial or great in the sense of like what you're doing here, you know. So it's whatever. It does at least have a lot to say, and I guess I like the discourse of it. But it's just kind of like, again, what's the point? So whatever. That is my long ass take on Final Fantasy 7 remake. Let me know what your thoughts on Final Fantasy 7 remake. Did you buy Rebirth? Are you hyped for Rebirth? Are you checking it out? Whatever. But I hope to get back to you when I ever get to that game, and then I'll try to beat Yuffie's DLC as well and talk about that. I will say I kind of am enjoying Yuffie's DLC way more than than 7 remake, but that's that. Thank you for watching. Hope to see you next time. Bye.